Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to kick off your week. I've been thinking a lot about the short term versus the long term, particularly in the United States. So much seems to be going well, at least economically, certainly in the markets in the United States in the short term. The US is outgrowing its allies. It is out competing. Productivity, competitiveness is a lot higher. Markets, of course, are at record levels. And part of that is that countries, most of them around the world, don't want to get in a fight with the United States when it's much more powerful. And so doing what they can to create deals. And those deals are pretty advantageous. If you've got the Japanese saying they're going to spend $550 billion in the US while Trump is president, and South Korea $350 billion, and maybe the Europeans are going to be spending more. I see lots of companies that are, pharmaceutical companies that are trying to do more in the US because otherwise they're going to be hit with heavy tariffs. And all of this plays well. And then in the United States, we see massive amounts of deficit spending. And as long as the US dollar is the global reserve currency, markets are going to bet in favor of short-term liquidity and short-term growth. All of that seems very positive. I am worried about the longer term. I'm worried about immigration, that if the United States becomes less attractive for highly skilled immigrants, in terms of cost, in terms of questionable liberties, in terms of policies out of whack with the rest of the world, perceptions of racism, the fact that the Chinese are immediately coming out with a new visa to make their system more attractive than the United States for those talented people. That Canada, you go into an airport and they see it as an opportunity. Hey, come here, we're going to welcome you. I worry about what that means long term. I worry about taking on universities, the world's finest universities. I don't really care if comp lit departments that were becoming way too captured by a fringe progressivism in the US political system, and the professors and the postdocs and the grad students that align with it, that was way overdue to take those departments on. But that's very different than going after scientific research and innovation, going after the ability of these universities to maintain their world-class, cutting-edge, advanced sciences, and attract the best, the most skilled students that will eventually become the most skilled labor and scientists from all over the world. I worry a lot about that. I worry about Americans increasingly not believing in science, and concerns around growing skepticism in vaccines and support for conspiracy theories and things that make the average American less capable of believing in advances than other citizens around the world. I worry about the United States racing ahead in AI affecting society, and that being core to the models that's raising all this money, as opposed to in China, where they don't care much about the consumer side, which they see as potentially dangerous. Instead, they're putting all of their efforts towards using AI for defense and for industrial advances, which have much less downside in terms of the functioning of society and the fragmentation of society, and not to mention the psychosis of society. I worry about the US long-term taking on free markets, the impact of putting tariffs on that are the highest we've seen from the US in 100 years, that the costs, both borne by American citizens who are taxpayers after all, and this will act as a value-added tax on them, but also on making goods more expensive and therefore reducing growth and efficiency in the United States. I worry long-term about the implications of industrial policy and state capitalism that will make Americans less competitive as opposed to more. I particularly worry about the US on energy. The Americans have become the world's most powerful petrostate, producing the most oil and gas and coal of any country in the world. And I don't have a problem with that at all. I think investing in that energy productivity is really important for the data centers and the consumer uses and the agricultural uses that are extremely important and aren't going away. They're only getting bigger. And yet, I worry that the United States has given up on becoming a world leader on post-carbon energy, where the advantages at scale, the costs at scale are becoming so much more impactful because the technology is improving so much and basically ceding the field to the Chinese who have invested in world-class technologies for batteries and for solar power and for nuclear power, and of course in the critical minerals supply chain, the exploitation, the processing that the United States has not, that long-term this is a real problem. Now, the United States remains today by far the most powerful country in the world. But that power today comes principally from its economic system and its military system, not from its political system. The US political system is in crisis, and it's also not a long-term political system. Every election cycle, things change. If you want to benefit in having political choices that are really going to dramatically change outcomes and winners and losers, you want that system to be more structurally stable and long-term over time. And the US system is not oriented towards that. When I look at long-term, whether the United States will continue to be as competitive as it has been, will continue to be as functional as an economy and outperforming both its allies and its adversaries, it seems to me that an enormous amount of self-harm and damage is presently being done. And perhaps the most significant self-harm and damage is the idea that the principal enemies to the United States are inside the country, especially because it seems to be the one thing that everyone agrees on in America today. They just disagree on who that enemy is. That's it for today. I'll talk to you all real soon.